Hi, this is Renee Cormier from the Fractional Referral Network. Today we are talking about transforming marketing with emotional intelligence. And my guest today is Michelle Silva. Michelle is a marketing professional who works with specifically with women entrepreneurs, and she specializes in marketing and leveraging emotional intelligence to create better relationships with customers and co-workers. So, Michelle, anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yes, first of all, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Renee, for the invitation to speak with you today about this topic. It's very close to my heart. I have been having a lot of interesting conversations about marketing and differentiating and how you can differentiate. And with clients that I speak with, and just all my, years, 20 plus years now of marketing, it's something that it just continues to come up of how can I differentiate. And this is an area that I really believe that is something that can do that for people. So we see certain commercials and it's like, oh, that really resonated with me. A lot of times it's because it's an emotional connection. So I'm excited to share about this topic today. And so let's get started. I'm excited to dig in today. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So, maybe you can explain to everyone what emotional intelligence is and why it's important in marketing leadership.
Yeah, emotional intelligence is really more about understanding and managing not only your own emotions, but how to recognize and influence, not manipulate, but influence others. And so this can be um, through understanding your clients or understanding your teammates and coworkers, or others in your company. Um, Handling change. So people don't usually manage change very well, right? So how do we manage that? It's an emotional response of something's happening. It's, this fear of change. And so how do we help with that? Like one thing that's happening right now that's a huge change is AI. And a lot of people are like, oh, we need to bring it on. That's a whole other subject matter, but it's still a change. And how do we manage that in a business or, in really in a business situation for that matter? How do we value employees? That's like the company culture piece of, we're all people, so we all have emotions. So emotional intelligence of, kind of helping to manage and influence those around us can, keep clients happy or not, and helping, others in a management situation where they may have maybe it's a customer service manager and they have like a book of business and they have to manage a certain number of clients. Well, how do they manage that relationship and how do they build that relationship? So emotional intelligence is kind of that thread that kind of goes through a lot of other areas. And so I think it boils down to, valuing people, and that helps to drive business because when you feel valued, you want to do more. So I hope that answers that question, but that's
Yes.
kind of the gist of it for what EI is and how it can, uh, and the importance.
Okay. Now, Daniel Goleman has written a lot about emotional intelligence, and there are 5 key components of emotional intelligence. Can you talk to us about some of those?
Yeah, so he wrote a book back in the 90s, and that kind of kicked off this whole wave of discussions and learnings about emotional intelligence and what it is. And he broke it down into like 5 key areas. The first is really about self-awareness, which I kind of talked about, as far as like your own emotions and like what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. Just understanding like maybe where your own biases are as well. So it's just an area that I know that like in the self, there's like a whole movement around, knowing yourself. And that kind of comes along with that. Self-regulation. Do you blow up or can you regulate? So controlling those impulses, staying calm in a volatile situation, those types of things can really help you where if there is like your boss says, oh, we've got to do this campaign, or the CEO is like, we have to do this. And it's like, well, you know, how are you managing that stress, or that impulse to, oh, we can't, do it, or it's really about self-regulation, in those moments where you want to react, but you are regulating that emotion so that you're more mindful and you're more thoughtful about how you react in the situation. The third one is about motivation. Like, what are you passionate about? What motivates you? Like, is it, it's not just about money, but like, what do you like when you wake up in the morning? What drives you, right? So instead of like, oh, I'm just going to go after the money, but what is really it kind of is that whole Simon Sinek start with why, like, what is your why? And that's the motivation piece. And then the fourth one is empathy, noticing others' emotions. Just, and then when you're crafting, like, for instance, in marketing, because this topic is about marketing and using emotional intelligence, like, how do you craft messaging that elicits that emotional response? Because again, in Simon Sinek's Start with Why book, he talks about the limbic system and how when you tap into that emotion, then you have that captive audience. That's you're speaking to their emotion, and that may make that a key purchase driver for them. So I think that, those four definitely are great, as far as the key components. The fifth one is social skills, and not everybody has that. So it can be learned, but it's really about building a relationship. How do you build a relationship? It's vital for, leadership, because you need to have that relationship with your team in order to really build that cohesiveness. Trust. It's kind of that, that piece of the trust. And then client interactions, like, you need to have an awareness and be able to speak to the client. So having the social skills to really get into, what is important to them, what is driving them. So those are some, key components that really just work together, that just make it more cohesive. So when you have these five together and they work together and you understand them, then you're able to utilize those in your marketing messaging and your relationships.
Okay, excellent. Now, can you give us an example of how emotional intelligence impacts marketing performance, I should say?
Yeah, this is an area, again, like, for instance, when you're building these client relationships, when you have that better understanding, then you can have that, you are building that relationship not just for the gain of a dollar, but you're gaining that relationship to have a long-term relationship. Maybe it is, ultimately they do buy from you, but they're not buying from you and it's a one and done. They're buying from you perhaps because of who you are, and that's where you build the loyalty. You're building that long-term relationship client. And it could be you put out something tomorrow, they're buying it because it's you, and they know that you produce amazing, work. It could be that, in team leadership, you are building that team relationship that's cohesive, that, they work together like a, fine-tuned machine, instead of disparate and this person's doing that. They're all working together because they know the vision. They have this common vision. They know what they're supposed to do. They know what the mission is. And it's like, okay, let's huddle together and let's get it done. And they trust you. So emotional intelligence, when you're in that cohesive team, that's where you're going to be able to probably pivot quicker. You're going to have a better morale, increased productivity, probably less absenteeism. You're just building that trust with the team, and you're able to adapt. You can pivot, like I said. You have this, you just kind of have that knowing. And that comes from emotional intelligence. There's a study by Talent Smart that I just love this quote, or this statistic. Top 90% of performers have high EI, or high emotional intelligence. So if we can somehow tap into that, you're going to have higher performers. You're going to have higher output. And that's where you can grow that sustainable growth instead of having all those pitfalls and, that uh, those mountains and valleys in your revenue, and also mountains and valleys in your team. You have kind of that, like I said, that fine-tuned machine, and you're humming along. Now everybody has, some dips and valleys, but you're not going to have those sharp peaks and valleys.
Interesting. Now, can you share an example of how emotional intelligence has helped you improve a client relationship?
Yeah. So I have had some very interesting, not only client relationships, but team relationships. I went into a team years ago, and I'm kind of one of those hit the ground running. And sometimes that feels scary. One, because there's a new person, therefore change. And so in taking a step back, after some people had their feathers ruffled and felt basically that I was maybe going to take their job or something like that, um, it it can it can really be helpful to just take that pause and have that, just to be introspective. What is that person feeling? How can I better understand them? What are they afraid of? So again, this is all part of those, emotions and the emotional intelligence of being more in alignment, asking the right questions. So with past clients, I've had some, tenuous issues in the beginning. We weren't the conversations weren't in alignment, and I basically just stopped. I decided that I would just listen, whether it was good, bad, ugly, whatever it was, instead of reacting, um, taking those moments of calm and just listening. It's that active listening that I think really helped in all of these relationships, is that it's not always just about me. Maybe it's some underlying issue that's happening, or the fear or something else. And so instead of being, tense and coming in as that bull in a china shop, just observing and taking that step back and listening. And so once I stopped being that, kind of bull in the china shop and listening, those relationships changed. I was actually very surprised. I have great friendships now because of that, because I stopped and I listened. And I also tapped into, like, for a particular person, what was challenging for her, and I felt like she needed to be recognized. She maybe felt like she was not seen, and I was able to recognize that and really just have conversations with her and just say, you know what, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate what you're doing here, and let's work together on that. And how can I help you? And that changed completely. It was a 180. And with the clients as well, is listening to what their pain points are and kind of where their struggles are. And it's not always what they say, it's also like how they say it. And just if you continue to listen, the answers are there. It's just sometimes you have to uncover them like an onion and peel those layers back. And that really is more about like understanding where their passions are, what their visions are, and just, if there's pains there, acknowledge those. And that's again where that emotional intelligence comes into play.
Okay, so how does emotional intelligence help marketers adapt to industry change?
I love this one. This is a really good question. Again, it sometimes we as marketers have to go at, we're like, we have to go fast. Some things change. We got to, pivot. Revenue's down. We've got to do this thing. And leadership is all over it, instead of let's take a step. Let's, look at, what's going on around all of us. Think of AI for an example. Many businesses right now are undergoing huge change and they are not ready for it. They don't have a plan. They don't, know how to use it. Their team doesn't know how to use it. Is their business going to thrive or die? They have to ask themselves those questions depending upon the type of business. And change is constant. We know that, it's that whole adage of, change is the only constant. And so learning how to manage that stress, learning how to, sometimes take that step back, take that pause. We need to, maybe we need to have a marketing brief instead of going, we got to do this right now. We have to make sure that is this going to work? Because what I talk about with my clients is broken bridges. If you start something and you stop and you don't fully realize what that's going to look like or be, leadership is just, going to say, well, that didn't work. It was, you only did it for 30 days or whatever. So being flexible, I think is another piece of this is like, industry changes very fast and a lot of times marketing gets the brunt or sometimes the boot. A lot of times we're the first to go in an organization because leadership thinks, well, we didn't respond to that thing right away. But if we are able to have the conversation about, yes, we can be flexible, we can adapt, we can pivot, but we need to do it thoughtfully. And if we can manage that stress and just say, yes, I hear you, that's, that listening piece. And let's be flexible. Yes, we can do that. And, we can reassure them that we understand the concerns, but we also need to make sure we have a plan in place because if we start something, we don't want to waste money. We don't want it. So we have to be mindful of how we position that with leadership and with, if we have clients that maybe aren't as aware of how to manage their own stress, we need to help them along. So I think that's definitely another area that is uh, that emotional intelligence can really help to mitigate some of these areas. And it can really help us too. Like if we are tapped into that, it can help us see new trends and not just the challenges. So it's that being in tune with, everybody around us.
Speaking of seeing trends, like how does emotional intelligence foster creativity in marketing?
Yeah, I just kind of touched on that a little bit as far as the
Yeah.
trends. Yeah, this is a really great question. I've worked in an organization where we had a legal aspect, and legal had to review everything. And they have a tendency to be very conservative and cautious, which is great in some cases. But when it concerns marketing and we want to be creative and we want to do certain things and say certain things, it can stifle that creativity and innovation. And they're, like maybe they have legacy, platforms or, other things. And of course, now we have AI and it's like, where are we? Are we going to thrive? Are we going to die? It comes back to that question. So helping them understand, helping others understand who may be that more cautious or conservative of, what, let's give this a try. If it's not illegal, obviously, let's give this a try. If we're not saying anything that, promises something that we can't deliver, can we try it? And to have those conversations of give us a chance. Because through emotional intelligence, we can create like that safe place in a meeting, for instance, where, hey, let's all huddle together. Let's talk this out. We have this problem. How can we come up with a solution? With emotional intelligence, not to judge, like throw out all those brainstorm ideas instead of saying, I don't like that one or whatever. It's like, you know what? Hold all that judgment because you never know. That one idea could be the idea. And so also it helps with having that safe place to have different perspectives, different points of view, listening instead of just closing your ears and not listening after somebody says something. And that can go for really any topic of the day these days. So having that open mind, um, It also helps when leadership can also be open-minded and inspire the teams to say, you know what, just have an open mind. Let's talk about all of these things. It can help with problem solving just by doing that, because if we're open to new ideas and creativity, we don't know where that's going to lead. And having that holding that space through emotional intelligence, I think really helps with that. And that's, it does take we have to take a little risk here and there. And it doesn't necessarily mean we have to take these big risks, but if we're able to just take calculated risks and think about things in a different way and just being open and going back to, those 5 areas that I talked about at the beginning, that's going to help us not only foster that creativity, but foster that innovation that we might not have realized if we were a closed-minded organization, or the client was closed-minded and we didn't help bring them along. So that's where I think the excitement really around emotional intelligence can help differentiate a company.
So how does empathy key into effective marketing?
Empathy, it has, I think some people think of it as a weakness. And in this case, I think empathy is really about a strength. How can we truly understand our client, their hopes, their fears, their pain points, their dreams? If we don't hold empathy about just going beyond demographics and data, I think that we're going to lose an aspect of how we show up as a marketing professional or how we understand marketing. Because as I said, it's really the emotions of our audience. What are their key um, purchase drivers? It is generally, I need this thing or I want this thing because, and it's an emotion. It's going to make me happy, or it's going to make me, be happy, or, whatever. So those kinds of things, it's really about getting into their hearts and not in their heads, because we make purchases generally from a heart, like, oh, that's cool, that's exciting. And so those are ways that we can tap into into the empathy, into the emotion. And this also comes into play, interestingly enough, when you're developing an ideal client profile. When I develop my ideal client profiles, I look at their frustrations and their fears and their pain points and what's going to make them happy, and what's the before state and what's the after state of working with me. And Simon, again, I love him, writes in his book, Start With Why, where he explains that limbic brain, where again, it drives our behaviors, our choices, and it really taps into like that purpose or belief of, instead of focusing on the what and the how, it's like, why do people buy? They buy for an emotional reason. And it also goes into that area of building loyalty. People don't build loyalty without an emotion. I love Coca-Cola, or I love whatever, insert whatever brand. And so those are reasons why empathy is an effective tool in marketing. And it just resonates. So, and it also helps us manage crises. Like when a customer has concerns or complaints, that's an emotional response. So it it not only is in the positive of what can we do to change from either negative or or even for both sides of that. So how can we tap into, like I said earlier, the frustrations and the fears and all of those types of things? But then, how can we manage a crisis? That's a very emotional response. And again, going into that self-regulation of, okay, this is a crisis, instead of freaking out or panicking, how can we, how can we manage this in a mindful way? What is it that we need to tune into that we aren't missing the mark? I know in a company that I worked with before, um, some social justice things happened. I won't name them, but it was like, this is a big thing and this is a worldwide thing that's happening right now, and we are staying silent. And a lot of companies lost business because they didn't take a stance. And so sometimes that can help you or hurt you. And again, this is an emotional response. And if you don't show one way or the other where you stand on an issue, sometimes that can definitely impact your business. And so again, it's who are your clients? Does this matter to them? And then if it does, again, it's empathy and it's emotional intelligence and understanding where they are and how you can help them and where you can take them. So
So
it's a
can
lot to
emotional,
unpack.
yes, can emotional intelligence be developed over time? I mean, if you don't have a lot of natural depth, can you wittingly develop that?
Yes, it can take time. So the quick answer is yes, you can learn it. It is something that you can learn with practice. There's been some research by um, three people, Mayer, Roberts, and Barsade, and they wrote a paper called "Human Abilities, Emotional Intelligence." A very interesting paper, and basically it just shows that emotional intelligence can evolve over time, and you can learn different skills. It may not be that you get it all at once. And so, just with most things, you didn't learn to walk first, you had to learn to crawl. So, but part of it is self-reflection. I'll go through, there's about six or so areas. So the first is self-reflection. Like, where are you now? Do you have it? Do you feel like you have it? You can ask other people, do you feel like I understand from an emotional level where people come from? What are their emotional responses and behaviors, things like that. Feedback, as I said, ask other people, not only your close, and it could be scary to ask other people because it could be a fear of judgment at that point, like, do you have this or not, kind of thing. But, being open to that feedback, like, how do your, colleagues view you in that regard? How do your mentors and your family and friends and then there are workshops about this. You can take workshops. So it's not something that is just something that you are born with, although some people are. I believe I'm probably one of those that was probably born with it. My why is compassion. I've always had it, but not everybody does. And yes, learning it can help you, uh, be more in tune. Reading, practicing. It might feel weird to practice when it's, not intuitive at first. But just being mindful. There's also coaching. There are a lot of coaches that talk about emotional intelligence and personal development. Um, but I think it's really about, honestly, it really just, in my mind, boils down to mindfulness, self-reflection and mindfulness. Do I have this? Do I want it? How can it help me? How can it help me have better relationships? And honestly, this isn't just a business thing. How can it help me in my personal relationships with my family and my friends and others? And obviously in the workplace, it's going to help tremendously. As I shared, I had a few, not so great relationships. And over time, just trying to understand where they were coming from, really turn those around into, great friendships. So, and those were colleagues at work. And now we're friends outside of that. So I think that that is an area that we can tune into and master over time.
So how has prioritizing emotional intelligence and change your approach to your business, the Savvy CMO?
Yeah. As I said, I just feel that it really has improved my client relationships when I'm listening to them instead of talking. If I just stop and pause and listen, I can learn a lot more. It also with their teams, and because again, if I'm a fractional CMO coming into a client's business and they already have a team established, it's going to be, probably a little bit threatening. Am I on the chopping block? Am I going to lose my job? And, what's this person doing? And, messing up my mojo or whatever, right? So how can you have better team dynamics and creating that safe space to, have those conversations and to, develop that synergy and to develop a fine-tuned machine within that client's business. It also increases, adaptability. better conflict resolution. I think that's another area that, a client, like the other day I was talking to a gal and she had she had to go, she had a client issue. And so it's like, oh, okay. But again, even if we do have a client issue and we have to react, how can we react in a mindful way that isn't just reacting and then setting ourselves up for failure? So emotional intelligence can help us to better manage situations that might come up so that we do set ourselves up for success, and also help the client realize that sustainable growth, as I said, because if we're centered and we have that self-regulation, then we can be that calm ship in that stormy sea and just kind of ride those waves, and they're not so huge. And just again, going back to creativity, just helping in my with my clients of, oh, have we thought of that? Can we do that? And having those fun conversations about marketing and creating those the innovation in that place to develop those ideas. So I think those are definitely some areas, and of course those are just a few off the top of my head, but you can see where emotional intelligence can really help you change your own approach to about your business, and that's how I've done it with mine.
Okay. Dan and Tyrone, do you guys have questions for Michelle?
I have one question. I'm assuming this whole emotional intelligence is not an overnight kind of thing. So I'm just curious to know, are there assessments or something that someone is going to have to go through or going through so that they actually become self-aware? Because I'm assuming the process is I need to become self-aware before I can understand you and how you're wired and all that stuff. So I'm just trying
Yeah.
to figure out, what is that process for that with the stuff that you do on the
Yeah,
marketing side?
so that is a very interesting question. So yes, there are assessments that are out there, and I don't have an assessment currently, but it is something that I am working on right now, because I have a little bit different way of applying it with my business. But there are you can, I think, even emotional, and I don't I there are a host of assessments out there that you can try, but emotional intelligence is has been around for decades. Um, so I think that's an area to explore. If you're unsure where you are now, I think taking an assessment gives you that baseline. And then if you feel like you want to learn more, there are, like I said, a lot of books and coaching and just different uh, classes and courses to be had in that area. Yeah, so yeah, good questions. And I've taken a lot of personality profiles too to kind of know where I am. So some of those, like Strengths Finder, the Clifton Strengths Finder, that's not necessarily all emotional intelligence, but it does give you kind of a baseline of where you are. Myers-Briggs is another kind of personality profile that can kind of gauge kind of where you are and where you fit, and maybe where you might want to learn more about yourself. But definitely with emotional intelligence, and I should have looked it up, but I'm pretty sure that there is an organization for it as well that will be able to help you with that. But this has been a very long journey for me, and then applying it in my business, I've just seen such a differentiator, as I said in the very beginning, of how do I differentiate my fractional chief marketing officer business from somebody else's, and how do I help my clients differentiate from someone who's doing similar work to them. I use this methodology and approach to really get into the mindset of the client. Good question.
Very good.
Michelle, I was one of the things that resonated with me is, so my background is more in the sales function, obviously, and there's a great deal of overlap here with what you've said,
Yes.
Over the last 45 minutes and what I've experienced. Over the course of my career, I've been brought into a lot of situations where there's been broken relationships.
Yes.
And where there's been, a stressor that has had to be remedied. And I know that, one of the things that I've seen with, let's say, less experienced people in the sales function is that they they rush into some behaviors that aren't productive.
Yes.
They deflect. They don't ask enough questions. They want to solve the problem immediately because
Mhm.
maybe they're a pleaser, when really what you has said is they need to take a pause and need to stop. And one of the things that that I've learned over time is just you've got to have the discipline, and also I would say you've got to dial back your ego a little bit
Yes.
to get people to unpack those issues, right? Tell me more
Mhm.
about that. One of the best questions I've asked people when they've come and they've had like this burning problem that is really that's got them just glued to the ceiling is you ask them, well, what's the impact on your business? They
Mhm.
want to tell you what the impact on their business is because they need to get it
Yeah.
off their chest. But once you acknowledge that with them, there's that, acknowledge the pain. And you said that, 20 minutes
Yes.
ago, but once you acknowledge
Yeah.
that pain and you say, and you get them to say it out loud, you
Yeah.
can't ignore it. Right. And the other
Mhm.
aspect in that is you can't help it be empathetic, I think, in that situation. So
Yeah.
yeah, I see, the things you talk about are, they're very visceral for me as well. And I've experienced a lot of those. The trust aspect is also something that, you know, um, is so really important, not just with customers and clients, but internally in organizations. And
Yes.
you've probably heard the term trust wobble. A trust wobble. Have you
Mm.
heard that term?
I
Is
have
that there?
not. That's interesting.
So a trust wobble is a source of trust breakdown that
Mhm.
occurs that if you catch it soon enough, you can basically
Right. It.
reconcile, remediate
Mm. Mhm.
the relationship. And it's sort of, I don't know if you've ridden a motorcycle before, but you can have something that's called a speed wobble.
Yeah.
And if you can take yourself out of a speed wobble fast enough, you won't crash. And
Yeah.
that's the idea behind this trust wobble. And they say the trust wobbles have three origins. There's issues with logic in the organization, there's issues with authenticity, or there's issues with
Mhm.
empathy,
Yes.
with exactly what you nailed.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear, sort of that dynamic in that marketing space. And I think that, emotional intelligence it's got such a high level of value and resonance in the messages that
Mhm.
skillful people push out.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I definitely see that, emotional, I mean, we're talking here today about transforming marketing with emotional intelligence, but if we put if we put emotional intelligence at the center of an organization, for instance, it's going to inform sales, it's going to inform customer service, product development. It will touch everything and it will touch everyone. And so I definitely think that it has a place and it can really be a huge differentiator for an entire organization if they're in tune with that. And I have been having many conversations, and it's just very interesting that lately it seems that it's like this undercurrent that is really flowing to the top. I think there's just a lot of, you know, the the I'll just say stigma of, company corporate culture is not it just doesn't have an emotional value to it. And I think that if we change that narrative and we add emotional intelligence to company culture, we can change how people are. And it really does drive that sustainable growth. It's not like a bad infection in a sense. It's like it infects everybody. And it's like, when somebody smiles at you, you can't help but smile back, right? And so it's that it permeates everything that a company can do. And if you infuse that across the board, I really feel that, the employees are going to be happy. They're going to want to, help the customers and it just has a very, I don't know what the word is, but just, a very almost like a blanketing effect of, everybody is just, happy and comforted. And again, you're going to have those crises come, you're going to have stress come, but how you manage those times and all of those things is really informed by how you are, how you show up. And if you have a solid emotional intelligence level, you're going to be in a better place of recovery. Like you were talking about, if you have a crisis that happens, it's not the end of the world. Let's fix this. Let's take a pause and figure this out.
Are
So
there
thank
any,
you for that.
I got a quick question for you and then I'll cede the floor. Are there any, are there any companies or that you think are sort of exemplars of having strong, robust, dedicated emotional intelligence within their organizations? Are there any that come off the top of your head?
Yeah, I think Patagonia is like one of my favorites in terms of this. Years ago, there was a woman, her name was Rose Macari, and she was the CEO at the time, and she really turned things around. And I just feel that, when we look at the brand today, it's might be uh, it's not the cheapest brand, but the cool thing about it is that they have a give back program. Like you can give your used Patagonia clothing and equipment, and then it gets recirculated, and so there's just a lot of different ways to show up in and to be creative instead of going into the landfill. Like, where can this go, and how can people continue to use it? And just kind of that again, that's part of that creativity. Like, here was the problem, here's the solution, how can we innovate that is a feel good for everybody? And so it's a culture of giving and servitude, and I think that that's where it also lends into that uh, servant leadership um, piece as well. So that's the first one that comes to my mind. I'm sure there are others, but um, yeah, I love seeing these companies out there just striving and doing great things. There's another company that I just thought of. It's called Thrive Cosmetics, and it's CAUSE Medics, and I use their makeup, and they again have just a very wonderful culture of giving and servitude and diversity. Um, and Kristen, I can't remember her last name, but she's the CEO of that company. And again, just a wonderful company, and they're very in tune with their customer base.
Excellent. All right, so if there are no more questions, I'll wrap up our call today. Thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us and for giving us your insight. That's it's been a tremendously engaging conversation. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And if anybody is interested, you can check me out at thesavvycmo.com, and that's where you can find me. Thank you,
All right.
everybody.
Thanks, Michelle.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Renee.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Toronto.